Okay, ready, steady, off we go. 7 p.m. in Estonia and in Ukraine, 9 in Canada. Perfect time to talk about some geo-diverse team building. Hi everyone, my name is Ina. I'm an events coordinator at Live 99. Live 99 is a startup community and we are also running co-working spaces in Kiev and in Tallinn. Our goal is to create startup success stories and help startup teams change the world. And tonight we have an event with our community member, Carl, Senior Director of Helios at MemSQL. And we have a Q&A session in the end. So it would be very awesome if you guys share your questions or thoughts on Geo-Diverse team building in comments, wherever you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube. Now I'm passing the microphone to Carl and hope you all enjoy it.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you. Well, nice to not meet you, I know you, but hopefully I know some of you. I've been at the Lift 99 office last year a bunch, and so maybe I've met some of you at that time. I am joining you from Canada, as Ina said. It's early in the morning for me, so forgive the very bright background. I'm working out of my mom's art studio, so that's the plan today. Today we'll be talking about geodiverse team building. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get right into that. Hopefully this works. Ina, give me a thumbs up if this works. Okay, excellent. Cool. So we're talking about geodiverse team building, as I said. My name is Carl Sverre, and I've been at MemSQL for about 8 years, or almost 8 years. And in the time at MemSQL, I've taken a lot of different roles, everything from a senior software engineer all the way through to my current role, which is a director of our Helios project. The reason I've taken a lot of different roles is just because I like to work in sort of a chaotic environment. I like to take on challenges that other people don't necessarily want to have to solve. So this is sort of what I try to do, and I've been really lucky to work at a company that has let me do that over the time I've been here. My Twitter handle is Carl Sverre. If you do want to connect after this talk, please follow me on Twitter or tweet at me or whatever works. So before I get into geodiverse team building, I want to talk about MemSQL. So what is MemSQL, the product? I think the easiest way to say it is just that we're the world's fastest SQL database. We've optimized sort of every component of the system for speed. And the thing I'm most proud of is that our database allows for essentially transactions and analytics to be in one system. You no longer need to have a separate analytical database for your sort of dashboarding workload or your user research workload or your data science workload. And it's separate from your transactional workload, which is where you do your sort of day-to-day application data. MemSQL allows you to bring those two different access patterns together into one system and have good performance on both sides. That's really, really exciting. So the one thing I want everyone to think about is MemSQL is very powerful, and it's so powerful that our free edition can be used for so many workloads. You could probably run a terabyte of data in our free edition, and you'd be pretty good for certain types of use cases. So I encourage you, if you do have a use case that requires dashboarding, analytics, OLTP, OLAP, whatever it is, please take a look at MemSQL. We have a free edition. Go download it, go play with it, whatever you want. And of course, ping me for questions. So that's MemSQL, the product. What is MemSQL, the company? So a lot of people in this talk, I imagine, are part of early companies, startups and stuff like that. I know Lift 99 sponsors and helps a lot of early companies succeed. And so, we're also a startup. We started in Y-Combinator in 2011. We were founded in San Francisco, and we now have offices all around the world: Seattle, Portland, Lisbon, London, and most recently, Kiev, Ukraine. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19 this year, we've actually had to go 100% remote. Fortunately, because our strategies always included geodiverse teams and sort of distributed team structure, we haven't actually found it to be that negatively impacting to our process. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today is what are the strategies that MemSQL takes and some of the things I've learned personally in my experience building teams around the world that help us be successful when we have to deal with such a crisis that came at us from left field. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I do have a bunch of things in this talk, so I'll try to go relatively quickly, but leave some. I can always go back for questions if you see something you want to talk more about. All right. So before we get too far into it, I want to sort of set the scene. I've referred a couple times that I've been in Ukraine and I've built offices, but what does that actually mean? It means that last August, at some point, Nikita sent me this text message. Nikita is our CEO of MemSQL, and he sent me this message and he said, hey, like, what do you think about starting a Ukraine team? He had an opportunity. He had sort of like a source in Ukraine that sent him a bunch of profiles. And I said, yeah, let's try it. Let's see what happens, right? So I'm very into experiments. I like trying new things. So I was all in. So we started our Ukraine team building process. And our original goal was within 1 month, we wanted to understand really quickly whether or not this was a good idea. So we started hiring really aggressively. And after a month, we had landed essentially about 12 or 10 or 12 people who were going to join us over like the next couple months. Really, really exciting to see that that sort of velocity in hiring. And it basically made us realize that not only can we hire quickly, but we can also hire great people in Ukraine. Our team there has been absolutely awesome, and we're super excited. So that was sort of where this story started. That was my beginning to sort of being into like opening up Geo-Diverse offices. And I went in all in. In September, I actually flew to Ukraine and with another engineer, and we sort of started bootstrapping what is now the MemSQL Ukraine office. So when I was thinking about this talk, I didn't want to talk about what I talked about before. I've actually done this talk or a similar talk before in December at the Facebook Developer Circles, which was also hosted at Lift 99. And in that talk, I discussed a lot about how that month worked and how we optimized our strategy to be successful in building a very, very fast team. In this talk, I want to talk about some of the higher level strategic goals that allow you to take that initial seed team and turn it into like a huge contributing member of your overall company, right? So turning that team into just a part of the company. So when I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking about, steps to success. This is a very common thing that people share when they're talking about steps to success. Not super relevant, but I think this is a little bit more relevant. So when I was thinking about this, I realized that at any point in the last, almost, well, I guess like last 8 months, MemSQL has focused really hard on something specific. And I think that's what the first thing you have to recognize. When you're building a team, you need to focus on recruiting 100% at the beginning. It's too early to start thinking about how to manage the team, how to make them successful, how to get them integrated with the rest of your company. You just need to recruit, get that seed team in place. Once you've done that, then you can start thinking about management. And the management phase is very much about understanding what you're going to build. It's about taking that seed team, those initial people who are just sort of random people who are all coming together at the exact same time, and essentially turning them into something called a team. And what is a team? A team has leadership, a team has mentorship, a team has different levels of different people, seniority, juniors, people are in different parts of their career. And it's important to optimize that first and get that working before you bring that team into the broader company and you sort of enable collaboration. And so these phases are not mutually exclusive. You do a little bit of everything at all points, but these are the focuses. And I'll be talking about each one of these phases in this talk with a couple of key things you need to do during that time frame. So phase 1, recruiting. In each of the different phases, I sort of thought about them in 3 ways. I thought about what you need to focus on, what you can sort of simplify, like what you should try to eliminate anything but this, like get rid of all distractions except for this thing, and how the connection works, because connection is all about a team, right? When you're building a team, when you're talking to people, it's all about connection. So it's like, what are you focusing on in each of these phases? So in recruiting, I mean, the most important thing that I think you need to do for a Geo-Diverse team is leveraging a local resource, someone who's actually physically present in that country that you're hiring in, and ideally knows people in a network. Network-based recruiting is super powerful and valuable. The next thing is you need to simplify. And in this case, optimizing your hiring process is really important. Your goal is to actually hire your seed team as fast as possible and getting them all starting at around the same time. It's not great if you have like just 1 or 2 people starting and then no one starting for a while. It's much, much better to get a group of people starting at around the same time and then build them into a team. And so optimizing your hiring process will allow you to hire faster because you'll be able to take on a larger pipeline of people and deliver actual hires in a shorter amount of time. And the third thing with recruiting, especially for early phase team, is telling a compelling story. I think this is true for any type of recruiting, but in early team, there's a lot of unknowns, right? They're joining a team that doesn't yet exist. They're joining a company that doesn't yet have a presence in that country. This is one of the hardest sells. And in order to sell it, you have to actually have a story that you actually believe in. So that's really important. So just to break it down, I think the local recruiting thing is really important. I saw this meme and I was just like, this is absolutely perfect. It's just so real, right? You're not going to just magically find people to join your team. And I found that the best success that I had in Ukraine was because I had a recruiter who actually had a network, who actually brought people to us, and it was a huge pipeline. So finding that person is absolutely critical. And let me talk about different type of network or different types of recruiters, because it's really important to understand there's a difference and sometimes you need one versus the other. So first, let's talk about network-based recruiting. Network-based recruiting is finding that like one person or a couple people who already have a network. They already are connected to so many different people. And because they're connected to all these different people, they're able to move very, very fast. When you say, hey, I need like this in this profile, or I need like 3 junior engineers who are interested in this area, they're going to turn that around really quickly because they have people that they can go talk to who trust them and are going to be more likely to respond to them. So network-based recruiting is key early on. There's another type of recruiting though, which is called outbound recruiting. So that's where you hire essentially recruiters who are good at selling and understanding the product, but they don't actually have much of their own network. And so basically what they do is they reach out into like LinkedIn, job boards, forums, whatever it is, and they essentially are looking for someone. Outbound recruiting is useful, especially when you're in that more like slow growth phase where you're just sort of continually adding people, but you're not trying to bootstrap. But it's a lot slower. It's a lot like more random. So there's upsides and downsides of both. Now, there's a major downside of network-based recruiting is that it eventually runs out, right? So like, let's say this person is our recruiter, they're directly connected to only like half of our graph. And so their ability to recruit is limited by how big their network is. And once they've sort of used up their network, then at that point, it's going to be very hard for them to provide you new recruits without essentially resorting to outbound-based recruiting. So it's important to understand that eventually your amazing recruiter is going to start not being as amazing, and you need to be prepared for that. So that's why you need outbound and network-based recruiting. But there's another thing you have to think about, which is when you're getting outbound recruiting, there's a really big risky thing. Let's say you have 2 outbound recruiters. They actually could, and this has happened, they could contact the same person. And this is really embarrassing. If you think about it as from the person receiving outbound recruiting messages. So I've been in this position, lots of people contact me like recruiters, and I often get 2 recruiters representing the same company contact me. And it's just sort of embarrassing. It sort of shows that the company is outsourcing their recruiting. It shows that they aren't really organized, that they're not keeping track of who they're putting into the pipeline. And when you get the same person asking the same questions, twice, it just feels like a little bit muddled. So that's the downside of outbound recruiting, is if you have too many outbound recruiters, you can often overlap. So definitely early on, as you're starting your Geo-Diverse hiring process for your new office, you need to have recruiters. My recommendation is starting with network-based and finding that person with like a great network or a couple people with great networks, and then expanding to outbound as they run out of pipeline. So the next thing when you're early is you have to be very thoughtful about senior and junior hires. Senior hires, are generally thought of as being in demand. And the reason is because they have a lot of experience. They can usually bring a lot to the table. However, they are also a lot more expensive and they're often very specialized. They've worked in one area in their whole career. And so that can limit them and limit your ability to hire lots of them. On the flip side, you have junior hires. They learn really fast. They're super motivated. They usually have high energy. They're just out of school. They're ready to sort of make their mark on the world. And I found that junior hires are awesome. Many of them will work out and become some of your best hires ever. So it's really important to have those junior hires because they're going to essentially grow up in your company. They're going to learn your ways as the only way. And because of that, they're going to do really well. They have a high potential of doing really well. However, they need mentorship. They need senior people. So it's really important that early on, you don't just hire one of the two profiles. I think you need both. You need both for a lot of reasons, and you want to balance between the two. So the next thing you need to do is optimize your interview process. At MemSQL, when we started our Ukraine experience, our interview process looked like this. It was pretty long. It was a huge qualification process, a huge on-site process, a huge offer process. Hours and hours were spent per every candidate. And, we have a pretty high reject rate, like not very, like it's like, I don't know what it exactly is, but it's high. And so because of that, we would burn a lot of time on this process. So when I looked at this, I realized that in order to hire that seed team, you have to realize how many interviews you really have to do. I mean, I think we processed, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was between 100 and 200 candidates to get the first 10 hires. That's a lot. That's a ton of interviews. And if you're going to be doing this many interviews per candidate, there's no way you're going to be able to do it. And so one of my goals was to optimize this. And so I managed to get the hiring process down to this, which was super fast. Resume review is something we can do asynchronously in bulk. Phone screen, you can try to keep that as cheap as possible with a really strong rubric. A chat is sometimes happening depending on the candidate, depending on if they need to have that additional context before they're willing to do an interview. Once they go to the onsite, I mean, really, we just said, let's just have one really high signal interview and optimize for false positives instead of false negatives. So instead of rejecting people that we may have otherwise hired, let's hire people that we may have otherwise rejected. It's a weird process, but it does work. And I think that when you're trying to hire that seed team, it's a much better scenario. So things to think about. And the final thing about recruiting is you need to tell a really good story. I think that when I think about a really good story, I think about Martin Luther King Jr., who said, fundamentally that well, I'm not going to say what he said, but he said his speech, and he got people to follow him because he had a story that he believed in. And I think it's the same thing when you're recruiting that early seed team. You need to have a story that they really understand, that they agree with. And with MemSQL, right, we told a story which was that, we want to build a real product team in Ukraine. We don't want to have an outsourcing team or a team that just does extra stuff. We want a team that actually is building real product for our customers and working directly with our customers in some cases. Like, this is a key thing. And we want the team to feel like it's part of the whole company. And so that was a story that we told. And I think we were very successful because we have now, I think, about 17 people or close to 20 in total, including people that are hiring later this year. So it's really important to have your story and have it really clear. That's the key thing. So I'll pause here for a second and just go back to our sort of goal. So our goal is to open a geo-diverse office. It means we're opening up an office in a geographically diverse place, as in it's not in any of the places that you know how to recruit. It's not in any of the places that you know how to lead. And so it's really important to remember that you're in a little bit of an unknown situation. So you have to be able to roll with the punches and make changes as you go. And the best way to do that is by having people who actually know how to do that help you. And that's where management comes in. So in phase 2 of this story, we have really, again, 3 goals. The first goal is to hire local management. Get a partner, get someone who understands the culture, understands the team, understands what people want, understands the language. Get someone like that to help make you successful, right? You've probably heard people say, hire people smarter than you. This is like a better version of that. It's hire managers that are better than you. Hire someone that's going to do a better job than you could do. And I couldn't say that I couldn't have done any better. I hired someone named Volodymyr, and he's absolutely doing a great job of making sure that the Ukraine team that we have in Ukraine, the MemSQL team we have in Ukraine, is doing a great job, and they're gelling together, and they trust each other, and they know what they're doing. So local management, absolutely required, basically. The next thing you need to do is simplify the employee experience. So with your new team, you need to make sure that they have a good employee experience, that they're part of the cohesive whole. And that means that when they work for you in their country, they feel like they're working for you, for MemSQL, for your company. And there's some things you can do to make that feel that way. And the third thing is connect. And at this stage, it's not quite right for you to basically unleash this new team on the rest of your company. They don't really know all the culture. They don't know how everything works yet. And so you need to basically bootstrap and seed it with literally flying in people to do that in place in your new team. So we'll talk about each of these areas. So the first thing is hiring local leadership. As I already said, understanding the culture, managing logistics. The most important thing is it gives a face to the company. It gives your people that you're hiring in the new location, someone that they can go talk to who represents your company. You want to hire someone that you can trust, right? You want to hire someone that you're going to give trust. And that's really, really important. Early on, especially at a startup or a Geo-Diverse office, you have a lot of the same problems. You have to deal with a lot of unknowns, logistics, things come up, they have to be dealt with. And having someone on site who knows how to deal with all these things, it's like a person who you can trust to get this stuff done. And it's going to be very successful because of it. So it's really important, hire local leadership. The next thing is optimizing your employee experience. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. So some of the ways that we've done it in MemSQL Ukraine is we've gotten things like financial services, food delivery, some IT services. We made sure that people have like good laptops experience and they're part of sort of the overall network so that they can do things that other engineers can do. Those are all key parts, but there's a really simple thing you can do early on that I think we've done successfully every single office that we've ever opened, and it has always worked out to be better than the alternative. And that is to find a co-working space. I love this photo of the Lift 99 headquarters. I still remember seeing the helicopter when I first visited, and I think it's Ragnar, right, Ina? Yeah. And Ragnar set up a really amazing experience with Lift 99. He built a co-working space that makes sense. And so I think it's really awesome that they did that in Ukraine, and they actually built something that worked for MemSQL perfectly. Why do you get a co-working space? You get a co-working space because people need a place to go to feel like they're part of the company. If they're working from their house, it's always going to be a little bit more difficult to feel that way. Now, obviously, this year with COVID, it's made a little bit more difficult, but Lift 99 is doing a great job, and they're actually working with that. And I think that as of today, we're open. So that's really, really exciting. So yeah, get a co-working space. It's absolutely important, and it will make your new employees that you're hiring feel like they're part of the company. So the last thing you need to do is airdrop culture. And I literally mean bring people there. Take some key people who understand your culture, who understand your mentorship, who understand how your company works, and put them in physically there for a couple months to help bootstrap everything. It's going to help everything. It's going to make sure that you're ramping people really efficiently. It's going to make sure that people understand how you operate. It's going to make sure that you eliminate a lot of like the low touch, annoying things that people get when they're starting. You want to do this early on because you want to turn your seed team into essentially a team that is already part of your company. So airdropping culture is very important. With the Ukraine team from MemSQL, we sent in myself and also another engineer named Sasha at the very beginning, and we were there for about 3 months, just making sure that everything worked. We also brought in our CEO, Nikita, to basically bring in sort of leadership side of things, and also our VP of engineering, Robbie, who basically made sure that the team knew that they were part of the whole. They were just as important as any other team, and we want to make that really clear. So, all right, how's my time? I think we're doing sort of okay. So we've gotten through 2 of the phases, and it's really important to understand that we're focusing on each of these things in order, but we don't stop anything. So for example, we never stopped recruiting because we were doing management, right? That doesn't make sense. It's about focusing on the thing that's most important at that time. And until you have a gelled team that's being mentored, that has structure, that has leadership, it's really difficult for that team to operate as a whole with other teams in your company as like an independent entity. You have to sort of help it along. And so once you have all those things, though, it's time to start collaboration. It's time to start integrating that team into the company and sort of like making them independent so that they can sort of operate on their own. They don't need any oversight, stuff like that. So Geo-Diverse Collaboration, how does it work? So your main focus at this stage is building technical leadership, and that means a lot of things. It could mean hiring some technical leaders, which you should have been doing anyways if you've been following my guide. It also could mean basically making sure that you're growing technical leaders, making sure that you're keeping track of who's doing really well and giving them the resources they need to be technical leaders. Give them freedom, give them trust, let them take a project and own it. And what you'll see is you'll see the best rise to the top, and you'll actually build the technical leadership sort of automatically. The next thing you need to do is simplify. Use remote-friendly software. This is just a general, how to be distributed. And luckily, almost everyone nowadays is a pro because we've just spent 2 months being 100% geo-distributed. So any company that doesn't have remote-friendly software now has remote-friendly software. I'll be sharing MemSQL Stack, and I'd love to hear some of your stacks. I'm sure that everyone has some interesting opinions here. And the final thing, most important at all, is async communication. One of the biggest challenges with opening a new office in a new country is time zones. And I'll talk a little bit about how that can make things both difficult, but also potentially better. So technical leadership, what is it? It brings independence to the office. I don't know if I would say we should go with the IBM approach of giving people badges, but I do think that it's important to recognize leadership. And the best way to recognize leadership is by giving people the ability to be leaders and letting them lead, like letting them rise to the occasion. I don't like to promote people to leadership. I don't like to tell people like, you're now a leader, please lead. I like to just let it happen and then tell them afterwards and be like, good job, you did a great job, maybe promote them or whatever. But the most important thing is making sure that that is happening in the office. It's a requisite for product and feature ownership. The office can't be independent and doing its own thing and building its own thing until it has technical leaders. So super important. Software, as I said, we need to have remote-friendly software. There's a ton of remote-friendly software in the world. I did not make this slide. I just took it from another person, but there's tons and tons of software. I think it's always interesting to hear about other people's stacks. So I thought about what are the categories of software that you need to be a successful geo-diverse team. And I think that these are the categories. You need to sort of have general communication, which is sort of just generally getting in touch with everyone else in the company. You need to have a synchronous communication system. So a way to basically have a video chat where you can synchronously share information at a very high bandwidth. You need to have task management. It needs to be easy to use. I wouldn't say that Jira is the most easy to use, but I will say that it works. You need to have document creation. And I'll talk a little bit more of that in async discussion. And we need to have a wiki and you need to have a calendar. So these are sort of the 6 key pieces of software you need. If you have these things solved, then I think you can be a very, very good distributed or geo-diverse team. And these are obviously our softwares that we use. Okay, let's talk about asynchronous communication. So asynchronous communication is not how this meme is, right? You don't send someone a message and then send them a message later saying, did you get my message? Or send them an email and then send them another email or ask them if they got the email. Asynchronous communication is about basically distributed queues, right? Some of us are engineers. We like to think about things in engineering terminology. Think about it as everyone having a queue and you're putting something into that queue. They are going to take it out of that queue when they are going to get to that. The most important thing about asynchronous communication is trusting that everyone else is working on getting through their backlog and not setting up things to have hard dependencies on each other. So synchronous communication comes from having hard dependencies. Asynchronous communication comes from having a nicely organized team where people can work at their own paces in their own orders and not have to necessarily be synchronous. The most important reason why we need asynchronous communication, I would say one of the most important reasons, is because of time zones. It's just not realistic to have synchronous communication when your team is spread out over half or all of the world. So here's MemSQL, right? So MemSQL is spread out across half of the world. And it means that when we wake up in San Francisco, Ukraine is, finishing their day. They're having dinner, and that's generally okay. I would say that's like that's an okay time to have a meeting. But if we move 2 hours later, it's borderline okay. Right now it's 8 p.m. in Ukraine. If someone wanted to go out after dinner, that's not happening. We go a little bit farther, and now we're at 2 p.m. in the afternoon in San Francisco, and now it's 12 a.m. Basically, half of the day in San Francisco, it's not okay to have meetings with people in Ukraine. And because of that, we need to be really, really thoughtful about our synchronous communication and make sure that we're building processes in place to be able to be asynchronous. And of course, if you go 2 hours later, bad news, right? It's end of day in San Francisco. You have your late engineers who like to work late. Well, guess what? They are essentially, they can't talk to anyone in Ukraine or even in Portugal or the UK during their time. So we've talked about recruiting, management, collaboration. I went pretty fast, so obviously I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions, but just sort of to summarize, I think that the 3 most important things you need to do are these 3 things. And I think you need to do it in this order. You first need to recruit that seed team. You need to do it super fast and get them in place so that they're ready to turn into a team. Then you need to go physically there and develop culture and leadership. Build the team yourself. Take your key people in your company and go and make that team successful. And then finally, you need to enable async collaboration so that that team can be part of the broader whole within your company. If you do these 3 things, I'm willing to bet that you will be successful at building a Geo-Diverse team, and your company will be more resilient to situations like COVID, right? If you're used to working geographically diverse, COVID is not that scary. I mean, it's scary for lots of other reasons, but not that scary from like a company, organizational, and communication perspective. So that's pretty much my talk. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was useful. And of course, please reach out to me on Twitter if you have any other questions after the talk.
Yay, that's awesome. Thank you, Carl. Really love the parts with employee experience and leadership. It's like super crucial. Let's see if we have any questions under the videos. Okay. What are the challenges on your way of building the team in Ukraine? What were the challenges?
I think that the challenges were things that I guess they were implied by by things in this talk, right? The challenges are getting that team, that initial set of people in place, first of all. Then it's making sure that they are coalescing into a really strong group. That's the challenge. It's going from sort of a group of random people, some of which might know each other, but maybe they haven't worked together. Maybe they're junior, maybe they're senior, and turning them into something that a group that can actually build a feature or product or be part of your overall company goal and strategy. Okay,
but what would be the hardest part about managing geodiverse teams, and maybe the easiest one?
Managing geodiverse teams, the hardest part is if you're trying to manage it remotely, which is why I think one of the key things you need to do is actually put a local manager. People will always respond better if they have someone that they can go talk to who is local to them. And in my experience, it's not that useful to try to manage a remote team. You can work with remote teams, you can direct remote teams, but fundamentally you need to give them their own leadership and their own independence. And having a local manager is key for that.
Okay, makes sense. Another question from the audience. How do you make sure people you recruit remotely fit your culture, or that they actually are a part of your culture while you're building it?
That's a really good question. So the way that you do that is by physically going there and basically bringing your culture to them. One thing you have to understand about geodiverse teams is that part of being a geodiverse company is that you will actually have a much broader company culture than a company in one place. So fundamentally, you as a company has to accept that your company's culture will change as you bring in more geodiversity. However, you also want to have a cohesive culture. You want to have a company values. You want to have the people in your company think about things generally the same way and how they do things and all this stuff. And so you do that by literally flying there to your new place and spending a really significant amount of time. Don't just go for 2 weeks, go for 3 months and live in their culture, learn their culture and integrate it with your culture, right? It needs to be some of it you're going to learn from them and some of it you're going to bring and teach them.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. But what are you doing now to keep the culture strong in a remote team?
Right now, we are we're at the collaboration stage in the Ukraine team. And the way that we're keeping the culture is by making sure that the team is integrating with as many people in our broader sort of company that we can. So I'm having different groups of people in our Ukraine team integrate directly with different groups of people in other offices around the world. So for example, they might be working with our Seattle office, our San Francisco office, our Lisbon office. I have one person in Ukraine who's working directly with, for example, our sales engineers. It's important that you, in the collaboration phase, you actually, now you have sort of the seed, you have this group that's ready to go, and you let them loose. You give them trust and you let them go and interact directly with the rest of the company so that they can start keeping that culture and exchanging ideas and making the whole company more diverse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely makes sense. Can you give an example of a mess up from a remote team that you could prevent now?
A mess up of a remote team that I can prevent now. I think, well, if you're referring to a mess up like that we had, I'm not sure if there's anything that I would have, well, that's a hard question. I'm not sure. I think one thing that we could have done better with not our Ukraine team, but with our, I think it was our like more our Portuguese team, like our Lisbon team, was making sure that they became part of the company faster. So something I learned in Ukraine was like going to Ukraine and like getting them integrated and sort of bootstrapping it myself allowed us to be successful because I sort of just made it happen. With Lisbon, we didn't send anyone really, but we had someone who worked in our San Francisco office who moved to Lisbon. So we had what we thought as a seed, and I think it did end up working really well. Our Lisbon team's really strong. I think it could have been a little better earlier if we had taken it a little bit more seriously earlier and basically bootstrapped more of an office and hired faster there. I think that would have been, I would say probably hiring faster there would have been the biggest change to how fast that office became successful.
Okay. Do you have some kind of red flags for you when it comes for the team culture?
Red flags. Yes. I mean, absolutely. You need to make sure that everyone that you've hired is going to gel in the team and also like your broader company culture. So at MemSQL, we have a culture of engineering excellence. We want to have everyone be very focused on being professional engineers, being engineers who are really good at getting a lot done and dealing with shifting priorities. Like we want people who are just really, really efficient engineers and really flexible. And if we hire someone who doesn't fit within that model, we try our best to sort of shift them to what we want, but we also have to be realistic and sometimes they don't fit. So yeah, I think that the red flags are, first of all, understanding your company culture, who is an engineer, who is the personality that works well within, how your company operates, and then making sure that you're benchmarking your people against that company culture to make sure that you let people go if it doesn't work.
Okay, makes sense. How's MemSQL do now, being on full remote and in different countries? How is it for the team?
Yeah, I mean, so as I said at the beginning, we already had a Geo-Diverse strategy, and so many of the teams in MemSQL are already used to working across borders or across offices, and so we already were used to dealing with things like time zones, dealing with things like remote meetings and stuff like that, async communication. And so with COVID and with just being a Geo-Diverse company with these things, it's sort of just more of the same. The only main difference is that now everyone is working from home, and that has its own set of challenges related to just people working from home, making sure they have a home office, making sure they have quiet time and private space. But those are things that we can address on an individual basis.
Okay, makes sense. Absolutely. And I see that we don't have any questions left. Anything you would like to add, maybe?
Nope. I think I just want to say thank you to everyone for to listen to me. Oh,
It's me.
something switched. Oh, okay, you're switching. What happened? Yeah, thanks for everyone for attending the talk. And yeah, if you are interested in joining MemSQL for any reason, MemSQL is hiring. We're always looking for really amazing people to join any of our teams internationally. And so yeah, please reach out. Twitter, my DMs are open. LinkedIn, whatever works. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Guys, we would love to hear your feedback on the event and to see how was it for you. Please enter memty.com and use the code you see on the screen. That would be very awesome, and that would be very useful for us to organize more awesome events for you and for our community in general. Also, both our hubs, I mean, 3 of our hubs, are already open in Kiev and in Tallinn, and we would be more than glad to show you around, give you tours, or just have a meeting here with a cup of coffee. And see you next time at our future events. Thank you, Carl, and thank you all for joining in.